Okay. Okay, that's my. I've got a few. I haven't really been doing many PowerPoints, but I've got a few this time. So I hope I'm not going to have too many, and I might have to shut up at some point because you can always go on too long. I always like to have something strange. So I thought "Grow Your Own Republic" would be a nice little slogan there. Just the idea that republicanism comes from people doing things. It's a kind of self-activity idea, and we shouldn't forget that. So if you can grow your own garden, you should then grow your own allotment. You should be able to grow your own republic. Anyway, be that as it may. This first slide was basically the key points I want to cover in my talk. Okay, so it's a quick summary. I'm going to introduce the topic. I'm going to try and give us a definition of republicanism, which proved to be harder than I thought. Then I want to speak about 3 epochs of republicanism. Rome wasn't built in a day, what's called early modern republicanism, and then new or neo-republicanism, and then a conclusion. Okay, so those are the points I want to cover. I will keep going with the slides, and then because I don't want to, at some point I'll shut them down. So are we ready to go then, comrades? And I'll do my introduction. Well, here we go. So I had a little diagram here that try to just sort of set it in context of what we've been doing. So we could talk about the idea of a Republican socialism, or the Republican road to socialism, if you like. And you could put up there Tony Benn and Karl Marx. And we've been concentrating ourselves on Tony Benn because we've been talking about republicanism in the context of the Labour Party. And obviously, therefore, Benn is a key person in that. And in order to understand Republican socialism, the idea that we had in the group, the idea I was arguing with comrades, that we should first of all just look at republicanism on its own. What is republicanism if you strip away socialism? Because in practice, a lot of socialism and republican ideas are all mixed up together. So if we really want to understand them, let's just strip out republicanism and understand what that is. And then we can see how it fits with socialism a little bit later on. And that will lead us on eventually to the idea of a democratic and social republic. And obviously we haven't got to that point yet. So if the LLA came to advocate a democratic and social republic, then we could all go home, it'd be job done at that point. So that's where we want to get to. And you notice on the Karl Marx side of this, I put 2 arrows because I've got an arrow because Karl Marx fed into the 2 things. One, Karl Marx himself was a product of republicanism. He learned a lot of his politics from republicanism. There's the arrow going into Karl Marx. And then the arrow going in the other way is that Marx himself fed ideas into republicanism and contributed to it as well. But obviously, we're not ignoring Marx. But the thing is, what we're doing is we're working on the politics of the Labour Party and the Republican Labour in the Labour Party. So that's just where we are. So the focal point now in this talk is not about a republic. We're not going to talk about what is a republic. We're going to talk about republicanism as a slightly different thing. Next time, I think we'll start to talk about a republic, what that actually means and what we mean by that. Is that okay so far? Yep. Okay. So moving on then. So I then thought I can't even see my own definition. I got my definition up there. I tried to think that goes at the top. I thought I would try to come up with a definition. And so, of course, I went to one of the things I did was, and it proved to be more difficult than I thought because there's all sorts of different ideas whirring around. I went to Wikipedia to see what it said, obviously one little place to go. And it simply said the idea in which elected leaders represent the interests of the people, it said, but I find that completely inadequate. So we'll just pass over that one for the moment. It kind of sounds plausible, but it doesn't really cut the mustard for me. Another idea talks about the common good and the political means by which collective action of citizens can participate in their own self-government. So I've gone around a few different things and I've come up with two ideas. So do they contradict each other? So anyway, this is a working definition, and it could well be shot down before we finish. But the first one says that republicanism is an idea or set of ideas about freedom, about people power, about popular sovereignty, or democracy from below, coming from the people, growing your own republic, as it were. So here, this one's got it as an idea or a set of ideas. And the second definition is that republicanism is the struggle for freedom through democracy, which culminates in a republican state, maybe serving the common good or the commonwealth. So one is ideas and the other one is struggle. So these two definitions don't necessarily contradict each other. You could say they're complementary. It's almost like theory and practice. The first one is about the theory and the ideas of republicanism, and then the second one is about what's happening, what's taking place, how people are actually struggling for it. And I did think of the Terry Dean test that we mentioned before, because Terry said something like, I want to see the end of the British monarchy, but how do we see this roadmap to realize that? Beyond it being a good idea, is what he said. Beyond it being a good idea. Well, the first definition is about a good idea, but the second definition is about struggling, how we actually struggle to get that. It's all about something else. And quite clearly, you could be engaged in a struggle for democracy, for sovereignty, for the common good, and not even know that it was a Republican struggle you were engaged in. It's a bit like a strike. You could go on strike and you might think the strike was just an event. Or if you're a socialist, you'd think that a strike was part of the class struggle. So you'd see it with theory in a bigger picture. It wouldn't just be an event on its own, it'd be part of a bigger picture as part of the class struggle. So my argument would be a lot of the time we could be participating in what I call Republican struggles, and the theory of republicanism, the ideas, are what sheds light on that. So we need the theory to shape the practice. So with some of these ideas, we can have a better practice of what I've said is Republican struggle. Now let's have a look. So we want, in the first definition, we want the struggle that's taking place to be informed by the best ideas that we can get, by the best theory that we can get. And theory should inform our practice. Now, I then move on a little bit. Just something we were talking about in the group, which was to simply, in some of the discussions we've had, is to pick some of the key ideas of republicanism: liberty, freedom, liberty or freedom, equality, fraternity. That was a problematic term, but humanity we thought was a better term for it. But it was a term that was used with the French Revolution: liberty, equality, fraternity. Democracy is really central to the whole thing, and that's why I put it out in red. Secularism is another idea which is part of republicanism. There's another thing going on there. And then the last one was the idea of civic republicanism, which is another idea that you get. So here, republicanism can be seen as a struggle. These are ideas, but it could be seen as a struggle between oppressors and oppressed. And that's what's taking place. Okay, so we'll come back to maybe discussing some of those particular points maybe later on. Okay, next point then. Now, the next thing I wanted to do was to illustrate what I'll call 3 periods of republican, 3 epochs of republicanism, as it were. And the first one is what you might call, I don't know if it's really called this, but you might call it ancient republicanism, or the republicanism of the Roman Republic. So sometimes people will discuss that. Then we've got what's called early modern republicanism, and this is sometimes called classical republicanism. It's sometimes called neo-Roman republicanism, and it's the republicanism that arose in Florence, England, America, and France. We're talking about the 14th, 15th to the 18th centuries. Okay, and obviously this republicanism is connected to the earlier republicanism, and I'll say how that is intellectually connected. There's a link between the first kind, the Roman type, and this, what I've called early modern. And then I'm going to highlight something called new or neo-republicanism, which might be called republicanism. It should say in advanced capitalism. It says is, but it should say in advanced capitalism, because I'm going to argue it towards the end. There's a new kind of republicanism emerging at this present moment of time, intellectually, in intellectual circles. And that's where we have to look about what is this kind of republicanism. They've all got something in common, but quite clearly they're all something quite distinct. So I thought it would be good to just very briefly go through these 3 categories, just take some lessons from these three things. Okay, right, where's that going next? Can you have a little look? So let's go to let's start out with the Roman variety. Okay, so here's Rome. Rome became a republic in 509 BC, basically when the citizens rose up and drove out a despotic king, drove him out of town, basically. So it was a kind of revolution, overthrowing not simply the king, but kingship itself. Now, the Roman Republic lasted from 509 to 27 BC. I don't know much about history, so I can't fill in much about this. Okay, so I'm going to pass over it because I'm not really a historian of Rome. But this is considered as the first example of republicanism, and the famous phrase, you might have heard that one, "Quibus Romanus sum," I am a Roman citizen. Everything was to do with citizenship. But of course, it wasn't really a democracy, this republic. There was elements of democracy. You could have said it was an aristocracy. You know, you had the plebeians and the who were the other group, the patricians. That's the ones I'm looking for, the patricians and the plebeians. So the whole point about Rome was this high idea of free citizens. Now, what people found, what people studied, people later to study, was that the really important thing was Roman law. Now, Roman law was the fundamental principle of all this, in which defined citizenship. So the law divided people into what were called liber homo, free men, liber homo, a free man or person, and a servus. And a servus was a slave. So Roman law only applies to the free citizens or people who are not slaves, All Roman legal texts say that a slave is someone who is in potestate, in the power of a master. So all the Roman philosophers and historians and so on, people like Livy and Tacitus, were interested in this idea of what made you a free person or a slave. And the answer was, if you are subject to the arbitrary will of anyone else, such that you are dependent on their goodwill, then you are said to live in servitude, however elevated your position is. Okay, so in dividing the world into free citizens and slaves, it's not a matter of whether you're being treated kindly by the master, okay, or being treated badly by the master. You could have a very kind master who's treating you very well and feeding you very well. The boss who treats you, so it's not how the boss treats you, but the mere fact that the boss has power, that you live in a state of worry or fear, because even if you're treated well today, it could turn out bad for you tomorrow, badly for you tomorrow. So in the Roman Republic, we have this relationship between the oppressors and the oppressed, and that's the dynamic core of republicanism, that division between, as I say, slaves and masters. Okay, now, again, you might take the idea, a woman is a slave if she's subject to the arbitrary power of a master, whether that master treats her badly or not. And there's slave mentality, is that the slave is always trying to keep the master happy so that they won't suffer from that relationship. Now, the slaves are normally ignored in all of this, which is why we got to mention Spartacus, which Carol jumped ahead to mention him already. Because when we're talking about Roman republicanism, we usually just look at the blue part at the top. That's what we're talking about, the law and what happens there. But really, you've got to look at what's happening down below, the people who are the slaves. And so you could think of outside the box and think that the real republicanism outside the republic was the republic of the oppressed people. And the famous case, of course, that we know a bit about is 73 AD, when 78 gladiators escaped and fought off all those people who were sent to apprehend them. I don't know much about it, but we may have seen Kirk Douglas playing Spartacus. I don't know if you've seen the famous film. Eventually, Spartacus had an army of 70,000 slaves and defeated many of the Roman armies that were sent against him, but not all of them. Now, three things stood out as I was just reading a little bit about it, because I know very little, and we all know about the same because we've probably all seen the film, but the three things stood out when I just did a little look at this. One was the first thing, that the slaves elected three leaders. They elected Spartacus, somebody called Ananias, and somebody called Crexus. So they had a little bit of democracy in choosing their leaders. And then the second thing was that they divided the spoils by equal shares. So everybody who joined this army, this slave revolt army, shared out all their goods, all the things that they got amongst them equally. So there was an egalitarianism there in this slave revolt. And then, of course, there's the famous point in the film. I don't know if it really happened like that, but the famous thing when they're defeated, they're in a field, you may well have seen this, and the famous act of solidarity, when the Roman generals say, well, name who Spartacus is, because obviously they want to get their hands on him as a leader. And Kirk Douglas jumps up and claims he's Spartacus. And then one after one, slaves jump up and say, no, I'm Spartacus. We're all Spartacus. We're all in solidarity with each other. So there is an essence in the, not, when we're normally looking at the Roman Republic, look at what's happening with the oppressed people who are rebelling or trying to fight against it. And Spartacus is a famous case. Spartacus got a very bad press, of course, in all Roman history. It was worse than Hannibal, which that's terribly worse than Hannibal. But anyway, it wasn't until the 1760s when there was a French playwright who wrote a play about Spartacus and saw him as a great hero. And Marx himself refers to Spartacus and this particular revolt, and he praises it. And of course, some of the German communists call themselves the Spartacus League, I think it was later on. So let's leave that idea behind. But the central thing there is the struggle for liberty and freedom against the oppressors. That's what republicanism is essentially about, that, and about the division of the society into slaves and free people. Okay, moving on a little bit then. So the next one I'm going to call, I think, can you see it up there? Can you see that? Can you see the top bit of that? It says there early. Yes. It should say if you're early modern republicanism, if you can see that. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this is a new republicanism comes up in the transition from feudalism to commercial and industrial capitalism from the 15th to the 19th centuries. And the key person in all of this is Machiavelli. So Machiavelli was part of the Florentine Republic. These republics that came in Italy in the 13th, maybe 13th and 14th centuries. And Machiavelli wrote, as well as the famous thing he gave, The Prince, he also wrote about, he wrote something called the Discourses on Livy. Now, Livy was a Roman historian. So Machiavelli dug up all these ideas from ancient Rome and turned it into a set of ideas about freedom and democracy and things like that. Now, the struggle for freedom in this period was revolutionary, but it was still a kind of aristocratic republicanism. And you can talk about England being a crown republic, but The basic examples that we have is from Florence. We have England in the 17th century, the English Revolution. Then we have the American Revolution. Then we have the French Revolution. And across all of these periods, we have, let's just look a minute at that. We have people like Milton, Sidney, Harrington. These are English Republicans. The ones, those in America, Jefferson and others. So there are Republican theorists developing their ideas of republicanism in this period. And we often think that capitalism created the working class, which it did. It was because of capitalism. But in a way, we could also think that these republics, these early modern republics, also gave birth to the working class, because it was because of the freedom that these republics achieved, even albeit limited freedom, that the working class appeared on the scene. And therefore, you can think of almost republicanism in the DNA of the early working class. And you can think of trade unions being a first example of early working class republicanism, because all those ideas I mentioned before, liberty, fraternity, equality, solidarity, these were all the things that motivated the early trade union movement. So the early working class movement absorbed a lot of these Republican ideas into, they didn't have socialism even at that time, but they absorbed these ideas. And when Marx later calls trade unions as the, I'm echoing there, trade unions as schools of democracy. It's where the working class organizes and learns its Republican values and its Republican ideas. Okay, now I'm just moving on to the next one. This was how Machiavelli set up his understanding of Florentine society. On one hand, you had the grandee, on the other hand, you had the people, the popolo. And so he saw a struggle going on in Florence between the grandee and the populo. And he saw that as quite a creative. He thought that the struggle of the people was the thing that really, the struggle of the people against the grandees was the thing that created innovation, created organization of people and others. So he saw this whole struggle for freedom of the people who were oppressed against their oppressors. So the whole dialectic of republicanism is the struggle between the people and the ruling elite, the grandee, as he called them, against those who were acting as oppressors. It was, again, the struggle for freedom that he took from the Roman idea of freedom. Now, I will then move on. How are we doing time-wise? Just won't be too long. Let's go next. Last one then. I want to just talk now about what might call new or neo-republicanism. There's been a revival of Republican ideas in the 1990s in the academic world. Okay, not so well known by people, associated with academics, Quentin Skinner, G.M. Pocock, Philip Petit and others. Okay, they're not socialists particularly, but there's been a real revival of republicanism, and I'm going to call this republicanism, for want of a better word, a new, well, they call it neo-republicanism, new republicanism. So here we've got this new republicanism, and it's appearing in late or advanced capitalism. Now, clearly, this is not about the transition to bourgeois rule. It doesn't make sense. Like the early modern republicanism was how the bourgeoisie came to power. This is clearly not about that. So we have to think of this something happening in late capitalism as a form of transition to democratic political power of the people, of the working class. So I think this can be understood as a republicanism that is coming out of the struggle of the working class for democracy. And therefore, Tony Benn is not a throwback to the early modern period. He's not trying to revive something from the 18th, 17th century, but the harbinger of a new republicanism, a new stage of republicanism. And all these three stages, Roman, early modern, and late, as it were, they're all republicanism because they have something in common. But clearly, there's something distinct about them, something quite different about them. Okay, and I will just give you two more little slides just to illustrate this, what they're saying, Skinner and Pocock and Petit, what they're saying about things, okay? And I hope you can see the top of that, which should say freedom or liberty. So what they stress, and they link back to, going back to Machiavelli, going back to the 17th century, going back to Roman times, they say there are two definitions of freedom. Okay, two versions of freedom. And one idea of freedom is the idea that you should have freedom from restraint. Nothing should get in the way of you. Nothing should constrain you. And we could call this the libertarian view of freedom. And that libertarian view of freedom leads towards neoliberalism. It's the idea there shouldn't be any regulations. There shouldn't be laws to limit what you do. There shouldn't be trade unions to get in the way of trade. Trade should be free. The working class should be free of trade unions so that they can freely go to work wherever they want and all those sorts of ideas. You know, we know all that neoliberal. So one of the ideas that comes from this idea of freedom is this libertarian neoliberal idea of freedom. And the other side of this, and this is what Quentin Skinner and these new Republicans are talking about, they're going back to the old idea from the Romans of freedom as not domination. If you're dominated, you're not free. And that's the Republican understanding of freedom, which leads you towards democracy. Because how can we collectively be free, be not dominated, but free? It's not through our individual action, our free action as individuals, but it's our collective action as part of the collective, as part of democracy. So this Republican idea leads you towards the ideas of democracy and self-organization. And the early modern Republicans would say that, you know, in the 18th century, now that we've got free capitalism and we've got free labor and we've got wage labor, we've now got all the freedom we want. And of course, socialists would argue that, in fact, wage labor is what Marx called wage slavery. If you're a wage worker, you're not free, actually. You're free to get a job somewhere else. You're a wage slave. Therefore, you don't have freedom because you are dominated in the workplace by the boss. You are subject to the arbitrary power of the boss. You are subject to the arbitrary power of the state. The boss may be good to you, the boss may be bad to you, but at the end of the day, you are dependent on that boss for your labor. So Republican freedom, therefore, applies in this case to the working class. And I think it's no coincidence that it's the rise of neoliberalism, which has started to destroy and undermine democracy, that has given us a response to that, beginning to work out what the ideas of democracy and republicanism are actually all about. So I think these intellectual developments that are taking place in the world of academia are a response to the neoliberal assault that we've seen over the last 30 years. Thatcher talked about freedom all the time, but we're going to talk about a different kind of freedom, the freedom we get from collective organization, a freedom that we can get from democratic organization. So republicanism is not just an idea, but it's about struggle, the struggle of people for freedom, the struggle against the state or the boss that is doing that. So that leads me to the kind of last one, and then I'll end there if I could. The last one, therefore, is in this case, and this Republicanism is about freedom, getting our freedom through democracy, and that could be the idea of national liberation and human liberation. So republicanism is about, can be thought of being a national movement for liberation, and not therefore not just to the obvious case, because we talk about national liberation, the socialist movement, about Palestine, Kurdistan, etc. But national liberation can happen in America, according to this idea, because the American Republic isn't giving people in America this kind of collective freedom either. And through national liberation, our ultimate aim of republicanism is this universal idea of human liberation. So fighting to free your country in some way, to win a democracy, to create a republic, that's just simply part of the struggle for the bigger struggle, the international struggle for human freedom. Now, a lot of that, you could say towards the end, is what socialists think anyway. So it doesn't contradict a lot of what we already think. But what I was trying to show is that republicanism itself is a powerful set of ideas about human liberation, about national liberation, and about democracy, and so on. So I come back to end it literally at this point, which was I come back to those points I had at the beginning, where I said republicanism is about a set of ideas, and it's also about struggle. They're two different things. It's about liberty, it's about equality. I haven't talked about equality, I haven't really talked much about fraternity, I haven't really talked in content about democracy or secularism or civic republicanism, but we did in the groups. These were some of the things that we were talking about in more detail within the group. So I haven't filled all that in. There's a lot to be filled in there, but I'm going to stop at this point, if that's okay. Yeah. I'll take the screen away, stop here. What's happened there? Some phone has come on. I don't know why that is. Why has that phone come on there?
No idea. That must be somebody trying to come in by phone.
Yes.
But all we have is a phone number.
Yes, we don't know. Somebody might be listening in by phone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, Carol, I'll leave it there.
Right. Mari is putting up her hand.
Is it okay to speak? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a plan to speak about this. Yeah. I would like to speak about this. I think it's a very this presentation is putting things in a historic context, and is putting republicanism in the context of passing from a slave society to a feudal society to a bourgeois society, and now there is a working class, which Marx called the proletarian society, which at each point there has been a change, and in my view, a refinement of the relationship between people, so that they start from being a liberation from elite onto a liberation from all necessity. We haven't got to the point of liberation from all necessity, but I think we can see that coming, because now we are able to produce enough. The planet can produce enough for everybody, so there is no need for a few to keep taking from the others in order to ensure their security. So this is what I wanted to say. I will go back to study all this, but I think that we see in what Steve has presented, we see the rise of the working class. It was very good, that bit, that it is not really strictly capitalism that created the working class. Yes, it did, but in a combined way, it did, because the working class could draw from these generations and generations of evolution of the struggle for freedom, which had come before them, and which now they could retake and they could integrate, and with new ideas, which I think is where Karl Marx, in my opinion, this is where Karl Marx is. And in my opinion, this was tried and not completely failed in the Soviet Union. That's only just my view, that it was tried to be applied, and then we discover a whole host of new problems because another layer has developed, which is not bourgeois, which is not proletarian, but which is still imposing itself on the working class. And so I leave it at that, in hope that it leads on.
Thanks very much, Mari. John, I can see you've got your hand up. If you'd like to unmute, John, please. Can you unmute yourself?
Right, okay. Thank you for that. Unmute myself.
You are, John. We can hear you now.
You unmuted now. We can hear you
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. I mean, further to what Mary said, and E.P. Thompson, Edward Thompson, in his book, The Rise of the English Working Class, drew, and I think this illustrates the point which Steve was making about the working class being born out of Republican ideas. E.P. Thompson showed how the working class movements, particularly up here in the north of England, drew on the ideas of the French Revolution, very much so, in order to engage in struggles that culminated, of course, in the bloodbath of Peterloo. The second point I want to make, so in other words, the working class for itself, as Marx said, as against the working class as a subject class, was born out of Republican ideas. The working class, not for itself, but as a class subject to capitalists and capitalism, was born out of the economic changes. But it's important that as Republicans, we draw attention to the first one of those, which Steve did. The second point I want to make is that to kind of draw out the difference between the bourgeois republic and the working class republic, or the socialist republic. I know we're not discussing that today, but in Germany at the end of the war in Berlin, there was all sorts of things going on. There was the Kiel mutiny of the sailors, and there were workers' councils being formed in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Munich, and in lots of German cities. There were elected representatives of people who'd been discharged from the army. There was all sorts going on, and two different republics were proclaimed within a mile of each other in central Berlin. One was the bourgeois republic, which was proclaimed by Ebert, and the other was Karl Liebknecht proclaiming the People's Republic, the Socialist Republic. And of course, Ebert said, "I hate the revolution." And he did a deal with Hindenburg and got the Reichswehr to eliminate the Spartacists, which Steve has alluded to. And I think that we must not forget that lesson, that actually the difference between the kind of republic which we want and the kind of republic which exists in France at the moment, exists in the USA at the moment, is absolutely central to what we're saying here. Okay.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. George, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I think there can be some confusion over the word Commonwealth, because I interpret as two different meanings. I think the definition that Steve was alluding to was the old word Commonwealth without the TH, or Commonwealth split into two words, not because I'll tell you for why I come to this, is because Ben actually talked about a Republican Commonwealth in the modern sense, not in the original sense. About the making of the English working class, I've always interpreted that as being created by the economic regime of the capitalists who industrialized. Britain was one of the very first to industrialize in Europe, and the rest of Europe was quite backward. But the working class, as we know it, was created out of the cotton mills in Lancashire and the wool mills in Bradford and such like regimes. That's and also neoliberalism came out of the ideas of Hayek. That was the root of neoliberalism. Thank you.
Thanks very much, George. Larry, I see you have your hand up. Larry, for some reason we can't hear you. I'm not sure why that is, because you are unmuted. Is it the headphone? No, it can't be the headphones. I have no idea why we can't hear you, Larry.
We probably better move.
I can't. Larry, can you not? Is there anything you can do at your end? Because you are unmuted. Okay, should we go to? Can I go to John and I'll come back to you, Larry?
There's Russell over there as well, by the way.
Russell, he hasn't got his hand up. Oh, you mean he's put his hand up?
Yes.
The old-fashioned way. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. I'll go to John at the moment. John, over to you.
Thanks. I just want to come back at George on this about the Thompson's book actually should be understood as the working class coming out of the economic regime of the cotton mills. The actual mechanization of cotton didn't happen until much later on than this. And I don't think it's a historical accident that this working class movement actually started in the 1790s. And the 1790s was the period where the ideas raised in the American Revolution and the French Revolution were current and were seized upon. People in general, and I think we know this from our own time as well, don't get engaged in struggle after struggle after struggle against their oppressors just because they feel an economic power over them. They actually need an alternative set of ideas to justify it to themselves and to create that inner strength that their cause is right, to actually go forward with that struggle, which is what, and I raised this point in order to buttress Steve's point that the working class didn't just come out of economic conditions, it came out of the ideas of the age as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. Could I just ask, if people want to speak, could they please use the reactions icon at the bottom of their screen? If you click on that, then you can see. Let me just change the spotlight to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
No, I can't. Okay. So if you could please just use the reactions button at the bottom of the screen, and if you click on that, you'll see there's a raise hand option, and then I can see very clearly who wants to speak on the participants channel. So please do that, because it's not, when someone's spotlighted, you can't see everyone, can't actually see everyone on the screen, and so you don't know if you're putting your hand up physically. So I really need hands to be up electronically, so please use the reactions button. But I believe Russell Kaplan, if you'd like to speak, and then I think Paul Collins would also like to speak. So I'm going to put the spotlight onto Russell.
Yeah, I'm interestingly, this idea of the origins of the working class linked to republicanism. It's interesting, and it seems a little perplexing that there's some kind of debate over that, because it seems to me conceptually and historically, the working class is the manifestation of industrialization, and the modern, well, no, let's not bring in modern. The idea of a working class is based on the fact that people are subject to wage labor. They have nothing to sell but their labor. Whereas prior to the development of a working class, people were subjected via other conditions of subjection, which didn't entail having to sell their wage labor, which I just want to draw this link with republicanism, because they were subjects of monarchs or some other type of ruling system or ruling elite, which was, I suppose, hereditary in some way. So when we speak about the working class and republicanism in modern times, specifically in relation to the United Kingdom, in a way, the monarchy and the crown are a kind of, there's a contradiction there, because it is an anachronism. It is somehow antiquated system bolted onto a modern system, which has led to all sorts of distortions in the I suppose in the way capitalism in the UK manifests itself. So I'll just finish off by saying it's these are associated thoughts that derive from some of the points and discussion that's been raised. Now, I do recognize that you could say that there's what I've said might be contradicted by the fact that you have republics in the USA, or you have republics you have a republic in France, and many countries call themselves republics because they don't, because formally they don't have a system of government that's based on the hereditary principle. So I recognize there may well be some contradiction in what I've said, but in relation specifically to British capitalism, the relationship between the working class, which is in synchrony with the developments in capitalism, and the sort of monarchy and crown prerogative, etc., which aren't in sync with modernity. They're a throwback to an antiquated old system. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Russell. There are two hands up, but it's now 8 o'clock. Steve, can I go back to you? Are you happy to have the last two people speak?
I'd like to. Larry's been trying to get his hand up, and John's had a couple of goes. So I mean, if we could just, if Larry's microphone's working, I'd like to hear him first. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, we're going to have a further discussion with Carlos in a minute, but perhaps we could hear from Larry.
Okay,
if it works.
I'll spotlight Larry. Okay. Oh, sorry, I spotlighted the wrong one. Larry, right.
Contia.
Yeah, so sorry, they're moving around here. Right, so John, can you still not, we still can't hear you, John, for some reason.
Larry.
No, sorry, Larry, we still can't hear you, Larry. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you. It must be your end, because you're definitely unmuted. Okay, really sorry. Okay, Steve, would you like me to go again, or would you like to introduce your guest speaker?
I just want to make a couple of points. There is a debate come out of this, and I want to just say something or other about this. The idea is that when this early modern republicanism, the bourgeoisie declared that now we've got republics, now we've got freedom, everybody's now free, you're free to work for who you like, your government is democratic, and that's the end of republicanism. There's no purpose in having republicanism anymore, except perhaps in a place like the UK where you still got a queen, but otherwise we more or less got it everywhere. But this argument of the new republican says, no, that's not true. We've got wage labor is not free labor in this sense, it's not liberation. And the kind of states we've got that call themselves republics are not democratic states. In other words, the historical job of republicanism isn't finished. And it wasn't finished when the bourgeoisie won their battle for power. But we need a different kind of republicanism, not the kind of republicanism from the early modern era, but we can take some ideas from that and use them. And I just want to support John's idea. George is right that the working class was created by economic circumstances and conditions that created wage labor. That's true. But John's point, and the point I was making, I think is very important, that the working class had ideas of freedom when they came into existence, and they got those ideas of freedom from republicanism, and that shaped the way they acted and the way they were. And the point I did want to make was that you can see trade unionism as a kind of working class republicanism, because if you see Republican ideas and you see what trade union branches were like, and people came together in solidarity and democracy, inequality, and all those other values of republicanism, they're all there in early trade unionism. So the working class was born with a kind of Republican DNA in it, I would argue, a kind of Republican DNA in its formation, in its foundation. And then you can trace that through, as John did, if you read E.P. Thompson, Making of the English Working Class. So there's republicanism right through our movement, but we don't have a republic, not only just in the UK, but we don't have one in America. There's still a struggle for liberation going on in America right now, and you can see Black Lives Matter as being a manifestation of that that very thing. So I would argue that republicanism remains a universal thing and not something confined to a few feudal monarchies that got left over from a previous past. Okay. We'll obviously talk about some of those things again, but I think Carlos might be. I'd like to introduce Carlos Gonzalez, who's a Chilean refugee from Pinochet, who was a political prisoner and came to this country and has been here since, I don't quite know when, probably the 1980s, but probably Carlos will tell us himself. So shall we go? And this is Republicanism in Chile.
Constitution. Good evening. Can we have share screen? I can put my.
Yes.
I don't know what it is.
It's just down the bottom, down the very bottom.
No,
Carlos,
I'm looking at my There's a lot of things here. Give me just a second, just to.
It should be a green rectangle at the bottom.
No.
Of the screen.
I'm there, but I'm looking at my own
PowerPoint.
My own what do you call it?
Screen, yeah, desktop.
Yes, yeah. Give me a second because I got a lot of stuff here. I've been teaching all day and
somebody raised a point while you're doing that, Carlos, just to mention a little bit. Here we go. Right. Okay. I was just going to say that somebody said Chile became a republic in 1818, so it's not really relevant anymore. So I won't take that.
Well, it is relevant for my what I'm going to talk is related to this, and in fact, actually, it's related to the almost last frame you show when you show freedom and liberty there, no?
Yes.
Because it's precisely what happened in Chile. It is something like, the process of it, I'll try to be fast because what I want to put is some of the key things we are looking into our new constitution in Chile, of the Chilean Republic. The process of independence has started from in the American colonies while Spain was under French rule in 1805, 1815, somewhere there, and was followed by the War of Independence immediately after that, no? And it started kind of slowly, of course, and there were kind of people started organizing in towns and cities in Chile and in the rest of Latin America as well. There were the first constituency assemblies there, and you can see below 1811, 1812, 1814 are the different type of constitution that were kind of discussed by people until 1928. So there were quite a lot of discussion on how to organize a new republic there. And it started with a very democratic form of development with assemblies that elected representatives to go to the capital to discuss the issues of the government, and they have only the task of representing them, not kind of and they cease to be working on that when the meeting ended, so they come back to their cities, and people who used to quiz them on what happened and things like that. So there was kind of a lot. 1833 started kind of some of the ruling class start taking over the process and hijacking the process of organization of the nation. Especially these are the more to do with the people from the owners of land, large states in Chile that start organizing the country. And they lasted for a long time until 1925, where the new constitution was kind of produced, discussed in Chile, which kind of was the new constitution that represented the new power in Chile in terms of capitalism the industrial enterprises and all that. And all the time that this happened, there was some kind of revolution prior to that. And Chile developed very well as a republic with the rights taking firm power of most of the governments along the way until 1970, when Allende was elected by popular mandate, not a very large mandate, but something like 38% of the population. He won the government of Chile, and it was defeated in, or the coup was kind of happens in 1973, as you know, most as you know. The local bourgeoisie plus the American capitalist kind of defeated the popular government, which was kind of rejecting the form of power in the country, so it couldn't. So in 1980, a new constitution was enacted by Pinochet during the dictatorship, and that's kind of it is in Spanish, this thing, but I'm going to talk just briefly. I'm not going to read all that. But the Constitution said things like all persons are born free and equal with dignity and rights. And that was the very first part of the Article 1 of the Chilean new Pinochet Constitution, no? And also start saying that the family was the nucleus of society. So you start kind of shifting things, as you can see on the first two lines, from what it was before, when we were talking about the people, the pueblo. And the state recognize and kind of support something called intermediate groups in society. This is very kind of watchy thing to say. So when you read the Constitution, the Chilean Constitution, it doesn't say anywhere that we are neoliberalists or whatever, but actually the meaning of all the things written in the Constitution, it goes like that. Now, it says on Article 4, Chile is a democratic republic, and the sovereignty resides essentially on the nation. Doesn't talk about the people, talk about the nation. So things like that. And they talk about the sovereignty has limitations, and they talk about the respect of essential rights and the human nature. So it is coded in a way the Constitution. Article 9, terrorism is contrary to human rights, and talk about terrible. It's on the Constitution, so many parts of what it says in the Article 9 goes against the freedom of people, basically. No, some of the things they said, the law protect the life which is still unborn, so against abortion. In Chile, there are no people that are privileged groups of people or persons, except it says somewhere down there that under law, taking into account the armed forces and security services, that right will be done by their own respective statutes. So they are outside the general law. They have their own law on themselves, and this is written on the Constitution. Yeah, so that's what I want to say. So this Constitution was approved by Pinochet in a controversial plebiscite in 11th of September 1980, and the military dictatorship. And here we can see a little bit of what happened, the burning of the government palace, Allende, and telling there, this is a photo, the central photograph is a place where torture was happened at that time, 1980. The chips there is the chip where torture was done, and it is one of the, sometimes they visit here in London, and we go in mass to protest with it. Okay, so basically, the plebiscite on the 11th kind of approved this and was partially enacted in 1981, fully enacted by 1990, when, by the way, Pinochet was gone. He lost, he won the plebiscite. Here is the paper from the time. By a yes vote for the plebiscite, 67% against 29%. So there were 29%, 30% of Chileans brave enough to vote no, which, as you see, the vote, you could see it was kind of transparent type of paper, so to intimidate people to vote yes. So this was kind of Chilean constitution, of the Chilean Republic changed key aspects of law and rights of Chileans, put the family at the basis of society, classify any political activity against the state as terrorist, proclaim that the state is an arbiter of society, renouncing or diminishing the right of people, education, health, pensions, all aspects that were provided, usually was provided by the state. Now they are provided by the state in some cases up the minimum, and others, private enterprises. Okay, as you know, in normal capitalism, you have some of these key aspects, education, health, pensions, and all that in the hand of the state. In neo-capitalism, neoliberalism, this is blurred, it's gone. No? That's a key part of neoliberalism. The Estado subsidiarios, subsidiarian state is kind of created, and only defense is in the hand of the state proper, no? Just to keep the order of the country, not to defend us against the. So these are the key cornerstone of neoliberalism. The constitution permits both Chilean and foreign companies to exploit the resources without any rules, as you know, the rules of neoliberalism. And this is the result. These are just photographs of the people that disappear. We don't know where they are, basically. These are part of the victims. You know? And according with the law professor, at least the constitution on 1980 has problems of legitimacy stemming from two facts. First, the Constitutional Commission was not representative, obviously, because we were under dictatorship. I didn't represent the political expression of Chile, and the commission that wrote the Constitution handpicked by Pinochet dictatorship. No. So it was done in a controversial and very tightly controlled referendum in 1980s. The campaigning for the referendum was irregular. Obviously, no one against the constitution was given time in television and display. Forget it about that. There was no electoral roll because that was burned by the militaries when they took power. They did it publicly. There were multiple cases of double voting, and at least 3,000 CNA agents, these are the secret police done multiple voting in different parts of the country. No? Despite the controversy on the conception, it has been frequently modified nearly 20 times. Little bits of things since democracy was reinstated with corresponding parliamentary approval. So you can see we are still living as we speak with this constitution with few little changes here and there. some of the problems we have with this constitution were the problem with the destruction of the environment and people's health. The water is private in Chile. People can own rivers or companies, rivers or whatever supplies. Santiago sold its water a few years ago and now are buying the water from a private company at kind of high prices. And it happens with everything in Chile: copper, lithium, fishing, water, forestry, everything was. And as you can see here, this is in northern Chile. There are some pools of water there just to irrigate the plantations there, and people there are dying or animals are dying of thirst in that part of the country. But these are for export for private company which bought the water rights and all that stuff. Pinochet finally ran alone on a plebiscite again and finished second because he lost the vote. And here you can see narrowly lost the vote, and the no people that didn't want any more the dictatorship voted slightly over the 50% there, as you can see. And this is in 1987 or 1988. And that started rolling up the new type of government we have under so-called democracy, which we've done. This government lasted for almost 30 years, and they didn't do very little in terms of the general well-being of the Chilean people. And this gave a start in 2019, what we call the protest for against the rising of transport in Santiago. It was raised to 30 pesos. What the student should pay on that was it's about 50% rise for students, and they start doing the protests, and this was coined during the process. It's not 30 pesos, it's 30 years of all this kind of rubbish that we need. As I was told you, some of the key aspects of the Chilean economy are in the hands of companies. One of them is the pensions. And here you can see this is millions of billions and millions and billions of dollars, which they are kind of taking out directly out of the Chilean economy and the Chilean pensions. Say $2 million a day. This is all kind of data from a couple of years ago, and there is a super exploitation of citizens, retired people, and all the pensions are owned by transnationals, etc., etc. I'm not going to go. We can talk some other time about this kind of thing. So the Chilean people in 2020 national plebiscite last year overwhelmingly voted to draft a new constitution, which was won on the fight of the people on the street. No political party predicted this, and people took the power of protest and forced the government and the politicians in Chile that are there now to force this referendum, which plebiscite to call for a new constitution. Chilean voted overwhelmingly 78% in favor of writing a new constitution. No, so we are on that process at the moment. Next week, or the weekend actually, there is a voting for people who are going to the assembly that's going to discuss this draft. And we are going to approve this new constitution by 2022. So that's something like that. So this was kind of the, do you want a new constitution? So 78.27% Chileans voted yes. And do you want it to be kind of written by how you want to be written the new constitution? Is it a conventional convention constitucional or a mixed convention with the politicians were kind of really, after all this, really have very bad reputation by now. And so people didn't wanted them to be involved on this 21%. It's more or less similar to the 21% that rejected the constitution. No? So it is kind of, and this is the people actually how they went to the street. This is a real in October 2019, how people resisted the police. There are 400 people that lost their sight, thousands of people kind of injured, tens of thousands arrested, some of them disappeared, people were killed. We got numerous people killed during the disturbances, and the police face at the moment just a very kind of maybe more. This is an official list of 8,500 allegations of human rights abuses over the past year only. So you can imagine how Colombia, I don't know, you've seen the news of Colombia. This is what happened in Chile 2 years ago. Okay, this is here when police throw one protester to the river, to the bottom. You can see him over there, down there. They throw him, and fortunately he was kind of saved by all the protesters that took him to the Amnesty International have been quite vocal on this and detail systematic human rights abuses on the part of carabineros and the government, and they demand end to the tradition of impunity in Chile. Now, last week, the government, especially Piñera, the president, have been not indicted, but in preparation for an indictment in the International Court of Law in La Haya, The Hague, for crimes against, against the populations. So it's in trouble at the moment. So many people, as I said, were kind of, this is a health worker that was kind of blinded as well. This kind of thing. Chile has many kind of difficulties at the moment. These are areas where we have what's called sacrifice zones in Chile, near the capital, Santiago. These are in red areas of Chile that anything can go. All the industrial pollutant and things like that are being put on those areas without any regard for human. This is how people responded. This is the last kind of march where 2 million people were on the streets. Santiago is 5 million people, so you can imagine how many everybody went to this just before the pandemic. So that was stopped a little bit there. So this is kind of thing. And I just want to go quickly to some of the demands we are putting, and it is what I call is the decalogue. 10 things that are important in terms of constitutional aspect that we are looking at. And that might be a little bit of light in terms of some of the things you were discussing today. We want a new constitution that changes the system with sovereignty for all this. I can see bits of it. Sorry, let me check if I can move this. Yeah. New constitutional with sovereignty at the center of the economy, politics, and social aspect, and international aspect. That's number one thing we are looking for. The recovery of natural resources and royalties are the value to some of the produce of Chile, and then the centralized support and support the regions. Basically, all this doesn't happen. free health for all people and private health affordable, because this is one of the things taken by companies, and at the moment we are in a pandemic, thousands of people are dying in Chile. It's worse than here, at the worst time of year. Free education, quality education as a basis of democracy. We are looking for dignity at work, free trade unions, and also restriction to union work. It's much more broad, this. I'm just being kind of very economical with words, just to go quickly on this. New state pension for workers, end to private pensions, and the raiding of funds to support business conglomerates. And new fiscal policy with taxes to the corporation and not to the people. And new society values. We are looking for that. We have been a little bit going ahead on a few things here. Construct a new society, less unequal, multicultural, the recognition for ethnic Aboriginal people, equal right for men and women, and etc., and all, etc. New industrialization, added value to our product and mineral, etc. So that's kind of, and finally, one of the things that Chile it was proud before with Allende, and many people wants to go on that. It's been proved now. Colombia is on the problems, and in Chileans are coming out of the street to support Colombia. Like in Latin Americanism, internationalism, to develop our common identity as Latin Americans. This is the only way for us to come and survive in a country at a time when we have all these big players like North America or USA kind of interfering with as they do with new democracies. Okay, so I'll leave it there. I'm really happy that I could put this. At some point, it takes some of the issues that you were discussing, and especially this issue of freedom and liberty. Pinochet put freedom for neoliberalism to be put in there, and that was the very first neoliberalist regime in the world, even before Thatcher brought some of the policies here, and probably will be the first country as well to defeat neoliberalism. We hope to do that. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Wow, quite some exciting stuff going on in Chile at the moment.
Yes.
Fantastic. 2 million people on the streets. 2 million. That's incredible. If only we could get something like that going here. Right, Steve, shall I go back to you? Steve, would you like questions from the floor?
Yeah, questions from the floor, and I'd like to make a contribution at some point, but I think obviously let other comrades come in. I've got something to say, but I won't say it just yet. There's other comrades, unless there's nobody speaking, then I will.
Could people put their hands up? Remember, use the reactions box, raise hand, and then I can see who'd like to ask questions or speak. Wow, I think you've shocked everyone. Carlos, I haven't got any hands up at the moment.
Well, don't be shy. Russell knows me, so he knows all about that.
I'll go if nobody else is going. So
okay, Steve, over to you.
Okay, well, I've just seen Maria. So from the point, I suppose the point I would like to get over from what Carlos has told us is a couple of points. Number one is Chile was a republic a long time ago. But and then it was as Carlos outlined to us, and then it was overthrown in 1973, but it remained a republic, but it became a dictatorial, authoritarian, fascistic almost republic for a certain period of time. But that wasn't the end of the story, because obviously at some point down that track, it sounds like it's about 1990 maybe, through this process that was going on, you might claim, or you might say, that Chile had gone back to being some kind of democratic republic with people having a vote. And yet the constitution that was set up embedded certain things in it, which Carlos outlined. So in a way, the answer to that is to have a different republic, not to simply go, well, we'll just tinker around with that one. And so obviously the Chilean people have understood that the rules that are written, the constitution that was written against them had to be taken down and taken on board and created something completely different. It's not just a matter of tinkering around with the previous constitution, and that required a mass movement to do it. And we can see from the pictures, this mass movement has come forward, and it's highly political because in demanding a constitution, it's demanding a new set of laws for the country, you know, and I'm sure that, you know, socialists are fully involved in it, but it's not necessarily demanding what I would call a full socialist republic at all. It's actually demanding what I called at the beginning of that, a democratic and social republic. And so I'll stop there, but by saying that in this story, we have got, you know, the idea of the mobilization of people, that a republic comes from the people organizing themselves in a mass way like this and trying to take power and to write a constitution for themselves. And it's a process. And, you know, the old idea that once you've got a republic, that's the end of that because we've got capitalism is completely false. So this is if you like, what I would call the new republicanism. It's about the struggle for freedom and liberty and equality, solidarity, democracy, and all those things that is part of our Republican heritage. And the working class gains from that, by the way. The working class has a major role in that and may come to power through that process. We don't actually know if it will or not. I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Steve. We have two hands up, John and then Mari. So John first, he got hand up first, then we'll go to Mari.
Yes, thanks. Yes, I just want to underline what Steve said, really, in a slightly different way. I think what Carlos showed us, put in very simple terms, is that one republic doesn't look like other republics, and that the word republic can mean two different things. And this, I think, creates a bit of a problem for us in that how we define these republics. If we start talking about a social republic, which Carl Liebknecht did, and which Ebert said in 1919 he hated. I hate the social republic, he said. He was very precise about this. He knew exactly where he stood. How do we distinguish between these two types of republic, the repressive, the reactionary republic, the Pinochet republic, the Ebert republic, as against the democratic republic? Can we do that without using the socialist vocabulary of bourgeois republic as against working class republic? I think we can. That's me.
Thanks very much, John. I'm going to Mari next. Mari had a hand up next. So over to you, Mari.
Hello. Yes, I agree. I agree with what has been said. I note two more things that in the program, which Carlos has spoken about, there is the recovery of national resources and sovereignty. So this evokes the fact that for Chile now to recover from the Pinochet so-called republic, then there has to be a separation of that nation from those other nations which are subjugating it. In this case of Chile, I think this is particularly important. And then there is the item of internationalism and a Latin American vision, which is the same problem, the same question, seen from another angle. I think perhaps in that case, in the case of ex-colonial countries, internationalism is the basis for the progress of the Republic towards what has just been called, well, I would say it has to be socialist, at least has to be working class, or with working class value, for example, dignity at work, which was part of what Carlos said. This is not a program of the capitalists, this is a program of the working class. And so, yeah, I'm not clear, but I would like us to remember that in some countries, the expression of your nation is a progress as opposed to empire, which is trying to crush you and to subsume you into the transforming you into simply into a producer of raw materials. Yeah, that's it. Finished.
Thank you very much, Mari. Russell, you have your hand up. I'll spotlight you now. Russell, you're muted. If you'd like to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. I'm unmuted. Yeah, John raises an important point for me, which I've been mulling over as I've been listening to Carlos, which is, I'm not sure how valuable the notion of republicanism is as a generalized concept. Because if we can speak of all these different republics, what explanatory value does the notion of republic have? For me, republicanism has a specific meaning in relation to British, or in relation to the capitalism in the United Kingdom, because it's a specific manifestation or expression of the British form of capitalism. But if you want to expand the idea of republicanism across the globe, I am not sure how much more it adds to an analysis of particular countries, particular states, how much more it adds to the concepts of sorry, just let me, not sure how to articulate this. If you want to understand capitalism in Chile, you don't need to apply a concept of republicanism. There are already conceptually robust terms to explain capitalism there and what happened in Chile. I think I've said enough, but I just don't quite get the application of republicanism across the globe to states that do not have some kind of inherited elite to rule over citizens or subjects. Thank you.
Right. If Steve, may I say something?
Yeah.
I can't actually put my hand up for some reason. I'm the host.
Yep. Go for it.
It seems. I'm sorry, Steve. I'll spotlight you though. In the meantime, I can't spotlight me either for some reason. I don't know why that is. So replace spotlight. So I'm going to put Steve on spotlight. It seems to me, listening to Carlos, that, you see, I thought that republicanism was so important. We needed to get rid of the monarchy, get the power to the people rather than the crown or the state and the prime minister, you know, exercising that power. But listening to Carlos talk about Chile makes me realize that just because you've got a republic doesn't mean that you've got democracy or socialism.
Absolutely.
That's been quite a revelation to me, I have to say. So perhaps if I throw that open to discussion from now on. John also has his hand up, John Tooman, but he has spoken quite a few times before. Steve, I'd love you to come back to that question that I have.
Well, in a way, it's the same question that Russell asked. It's, you know, the basic question is republicanism as an idea, as a form of struggle? And that's why I said it's an idea. I defined it as being, one hand, an idea, on the other hand, a struggle of people for power. Does that only apply in countries that have got monarchies? Which is kind of Russell's thing. In other words, it's a sort of question of British exceptionalism. You know, we're an exceptional country because we've still got a monarchy, even though we're an advanced capitalist country. And therefore, Republican ideas don't really apply here. And Russell's quite happy with that. And in a way, that's what you're sort of saying, Carol. Yeah, you're quite happy with the idea we do need to do republicanism in this country, is what you just said. But I'm wanting to argue that it is actually much more general than that. And it's actually relevant on a much wider perspective than we've thought. Because we're not doing, and this goes back to my three categories, we're not doing early modern republicanism. That is the one that gets us to capitalism, since we already got capitalism. That's irrelevant. People who are thinking, let's get rid of the Queen, are probably thinking, well, we never quite finished the job from the 17th century, so let's tidy the whole thing up a bit. And that's all we're really doing. But as soon as you start to look around the world into already developed capitalist countries, you begin to see Republican movements for new constitutions and new democracies are much more widespread than you actually imagined. We could start to find examples all over the place. We could take the example of South Africa, which is, as Russell knows only too well, which was a republic in probably 1948. I'm not totally sure of that date when it was, but quite clearly there was a Republican struggle in South Africa. And of course, it didn't end up, it had a nasty ending because it was incorporated. So we're not talking about how counter revolutions operate, but there was a mass movement for democracy in South Africa quite clearly. So perhaps that's another exception. And then you could look at what's going on in, I don't know, in Eastern Europe at the present moment in time, or you could look at Catalonia, or you could look at, you know, there are lots of popular mass democratic movements. And where are they heading towards? They've got to be heading towards a new kind of democracy. They're going to get to the point where they think we want new laws, we want new institutions. And in America, where you can see that the American slave republic, so they say we don't need a republic in America because we've already got one, but the American Constitution is a hell of a state because it was founded on racism and it was founded on a kind of federalism and all sorts of archaic things. It quite clearly means there's a movement going on in America through the Black Lives Matter and movements like that really going to start to want to redefine the American Constitution, and republicanism will be relevant to that. And then finally, I'll follow this, but the example of France, the left in France, I think, which is the fifth republic. So they've been having quite a few republics in France, but there's certainly a part of the left in France that's calling for a sixth republic, because they realize that the fifth republic they've got is really not very democratic at all, the way power is structured in France. And so the demand for it's not a purely narrow socialist demand, it's a wider, broader demand of the French people to actually get sovereignty, win their power, win their democracy. And that doesn't, for me, contradict socialism. It simply takes us towards it. You know, what's going on in Chile is not a barrier to socialism. On the contrary, it's taken us in that direction, but mobilizing the people for that aim. So it's not leading us away from socialism. It's not an alternative to socialism. It's actually going in the right direction, I would say. I hope that answers. Carol?
Thank you very much indeed. I had Carlos next. Carlos?
Very briefly, just to point a couple of things that happen in Chile may be useful for people around, which is the development of a new type of the popular democracy in the poor neighborhoods in Santiago, for instance. is a guy who is the mayor of one of these boroughs. He started using the system kind of on behalf of the people. So the first thing he done, as you know, health is very dear in Chile, been very bad, general and medicine and all that. So he created a popular pharmacy. Yeah, he declared, well, we're going to put a popular pharmacy, and we are giving you medicine for 20% of the cost of the medicine outside. And it was kind of started going like far. Now there are 60 of these in Chile, in different towns and cities. And there is a, then he done he started doing the glasses, I mean the optician, popular optician. And then he done popular university. And then he done the popular, he created a construction company building new housing, social housing. So the thing is going, it's developing. He is one of the leading candidates for the next president in Chile in 1 year. So there are things, and the key on this is the organization at root level, and that's he done. He with the people, he got 70% support on politically on his area, and he's been doing this, and this is a way. This is one way of developing popular democracy, and not necessarily socialist. But as Steve said, we are. This is good because it's the way towards that some of us want to go.
Thanks very much, Carlos. We next have John and then Russell.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really useful. It goes back to the point which Steve was making in the introduction, which is that republicanism is all about grassroots struggle in terms of how it behaves. So I think we can draw out in that kind of way from examples in Chile, in Catalonia, and in various places around the world, what the actual characteristics of republicanism, the republicanism that we want, has. But we're still left with the problem of the word. And I can only think that we should say that we are for a social republic, we're for a democratic republic, we're for a popular republic, we're for an egalitarian republic, and we need somehow to actually choose one or two of those adjectives and put those to republicanism in order to differentiate what we're talking about from what the British Republican Party is talking about. For instance, from what the system that Biden operating within is, and so on. So I think we know what we're talking about, but if we're going to be able to take our ideas forward to a wider audience, then we need to be very precise about what words we choose to actually describe what we are for. And I still think that Carl Liebknecht got it right when he said, this is the social republic. And I think that Ebert got it right as well when he said, "I hate the social republic." So I think social republic heavily implies that this is a republic which will take on the power of international capitalism. Democratic republic is also, I think, absolutely key. And I would personally favor using those two words, adjectives, to actually describe, to characterize what the republicanism is that we are for.
Thanks very much, John. I've just seen a really interesting question in the chat coming from George, actually. George, would you like to ask your question of Carlos? George?
Yes.
Would you like, I'll spotlight you, George, because I think it's a really, really good question
Can
about
you hear me?
in Chile. Oh,
Can you hear me?
certainly can.
What I wanted to ask is, what's the current state of the press in Chile? My understanding is El Mercurio was a right-wing paper, and in fact was responsible in the cover-up of a number of human rights abuses. They covered up the issue of the dumping of bodies over the sea, was one I can recall. I'm more interested in the current press in Chile now, in the dissemination of ideas amongst the Chilean working class, because we certainly, going from the pictures, you had 2 million Chileans out there on the streets. Can you illuminate us a little bit on this?
Thanks very much, George. Can I, is it all right if I go back to Carlos to ask him to answer those questions?
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah, 98% of the press in Chile is in the hands of two right-wing groups. That's basic, that's very sad. They destroyed the free press in the 90s by kind of asphyxiating them. And now the main form of communication for Chileans and progressive Chileans are the social media. The social media have been developed in Chile quite a lot. And we are, all of us, even me outside the country, participating in 2 or 3 talks every week because people are kind of discussing this lively on social media. But the papers are kind of El Mercurio. Mercurio was the owner of El Mercurio was a CIA agent, and he was paid by Nixon and what's called the guy who Kissinger. Millions of dollars in order to destabilize the country. Before Allende took power, he started working with them. And when the coup happened, he was with Americans celebrating when it happens, the coup. So the Mercurio, it has traditionally in the 1870s, 1890s, there were hundreds of workers killed in Valparaiso, and El Mercurio said nothing about that. Said they were rebels, they were kind of troublemakers and things like that. So it's been all the time like that, and this is the thing. We got some alternative media now, and all the televisions are in the hands of the ruling classes over there.
Thank you very much, Carlos. That's really interesting and really worrying, because we've got the same problem In
Over
England,
here, exactly.
yeah, we have our mainstream media is owned by billionaires who don't even live here. They live in tax havens. So we've got the same problem here. That's really, really interesting. And we've got the last hand up, I think, is Russell. Russell, would you like to unmute and come in?
Yeah. So to reiterate my point by reference to what John has sought to articulate in a way which proves my point. If you to emphasize that we are interested in a social republic, sort of begs the question, why should we use the term republic as a general concept? And I just want to, and also with reference to what Steve said, I'm not opposed to the idea of the social republic, specifically within the United Kingdom. I think it has great, it provides great conceptual clarity as to what the nature of the struggle is, but it does not provide that sort of clarity in relation to France, America. It just does not provide that clarity as a general concept, because surely the point is, the idea of a social republic is you are striving and struggling for greater democracy, greater equality, etc., etc., etc. So the operative term is not republic, it's democracy, the redistribution of resources more equitably, whereas the social republic in the UK, I mean, as Steve knows, I'm not speaking about simple abolition of the monarchy. I'm speaking about the monarchy is simply the outward expression of something far deeper that prevails over the British state, and that structures the type of capitalism that exists in the UK. So you know, I am in agreement with the idea of the social republic within the UK. It's absolutely you know, that's a novel contribution to understanding the British state and British capitalism. But all I'm questioning is how relevant the notion of republic is to the rest of the world, which are formerly republics. It's not the republic that you want to sort out. It's the it's what exists sort of prior to the the republic.
Right. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Russell. Yes. So yes, perhaps it isn't republic is the word. Perhaps it isn't the word we were looking for. As John was saying, perhaps we need social republic, democratic republic. It seems republic is not enough, is it? It's not describing what we want. Right. Thanks very much, Russell. If I go back to you, Steve, now.
Yeah, just to finish off, comrades, a couple of points. I mean, there's an argument going on here at the end about what we actually what we mean by a republic anyway. So, but, you know, and nobody's disagreeing that it's not relevant for the UK where we actually are. It's just a question of, is republicanism a much more generalized phenomenon as part of the struggle for socialism? It's not a uniquely British phenomenon, that we're just dealing with something a British exceptionalism because we never managed to get rid of our crowned republic, as it were, in the 17th century. And that's an argument. Now, the other argument is then, my argument is that Chile proves, in fact, that's not the case, that basically, that when the masses of people mobilize, they do not think the existing, in Chile, they basically, the people there have come to the conclusion that the existing Republican constitution, even though they've got elections there, is not the vehicle to set them free. They think that liberation is still got to happen, that their bourgeois republic, whatever form it is, isn't liberating them. In South Africa, if you think that the South African Republic is the vehicle for liberation, then you don't need to change the constitution. All you need to do is to get into government. But I would argue the South African Republic's no use either, any more use than the present Chilean Republic is. And the point of the new republicanism, the discovery of a new kind of republicanism, is to generalize that as a global, as a much more universal phenomenon, not in the earlier stage, the previous theory of the 17th century, that was about the transition to capitalism. That ship has long sailed. We're now in advanced capitalism, but we don't have democratic republics. We have people dressing up as democratic republics, I agree. It would be relevant in Russia. It'd be relevant all over Europe, that the kind of republics we've got are not instruments for bringing the social change that we need. Therefore, republicanism, the mobilization of the working class and the people to change their political system, is the road towards socialization. Now, the question of what we're going to call it, I mean, I'm happy with democratic and social, but we've not really as a group, by the way. That's the next thing we'll be discussing in the Republican Labour Working Group. We're going to discuss, well, what we mean by a republic as opposed to republicanism, i.e. the ideology of struggle, the ideas of liberty, equality, solidarity, democracy are all key part of it. Secularism, and the one we haven't really discussed, I'll just throw this in, was civic republicanism, and which Carlos gave us a brilliant example of. Civic republicanism is the idea that people do good for their communities to benefit. They're not doing it for private profit. They're doing it for the benefit of the good of society. There's a very strong strain of what's called civic republicanism, which is what you do when you go to your trade union branch, by the way. You participate, you get elected. Nobody's paying you to do that. You're doing it for the good of your workplace community. And Carlos gave us the example of those, was it chemists or doctors or opticians, that were happening because the people were doing stuff. And we have food banks in this country, which I would say is another example of civic republicanism. So republicanism is there, it's all out there, people doing stuff, trying to improve the position of their fellow citizens for no special gain, apart from their idea that would be a good thing for society. So that is also part of republicanism. In Chile, 2 million people, if 2 million people want a new constitution in Chile, they can't be all wrong, Russell. That's what I would say. I think they're right to want that, and they're right to fight for it, and we'll go there. Anyway, the question of what kind of republic we need, I think that's the next one we're going to be looking at in the working group. So this is a debate, you know, I don't disagree with John, this is a debate we're still going to have, and maybe our next talk will be, what is a democratic and social republic? What do we mean by those terms? Because that's what's coming down the track to us, you know. So from republicanism to the democratic and social republic. I would end there, I think.
Thanks very much, Steve. Seeing as the time is now 9 minutes past 9, yes. I think if there is another hand up, but I think we've really discussed. We've been around the houses and discussed a lot of very important points. Is everyone happy with ending the meeting there?
Yes.
Okay. So. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks very much to Carlos coming in and giving us some really, really exciting stuff from Chile. I hope we can get 2 million people on the streets in London. Wouldn't that be marvellous? Calling for a republic in England, a social republic in England. Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, Carol, by the way, for doing that for us.